I'm not going to start with a flashy claim or a list of specs because what matters most is whether this machine actually solves the problems you face in the kitchen or the back of house. If you've ever hesitated at the checkout because you weren't sure a vacuum sealer could handle your marinades, or worried that a cheap external unit would leak air the second you tried to seal a juicy steak, this review is for you. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The VEVOR chamber vacuum sealer is one of those pieces of equipment that sits in a strange middle ground. It's marketed as compact enough for a home kitchen but powerful enough for commercial batch work. That dual promise creates a natural hesitation. Will it really be a space-saving workhorse, or will it end up being a bulky appliance that only a professional kitchen can justify? My goal here is to walk through the everyday scenarios where the machine shines, point out where it might fall short, and help you decide if the price tag is justified for your particular use case. First, let's talk about the core problem chamber sealers solve: sealing wet or liquid-heavy items without pulling the bag's contents out. Traditional edge seal vacuum machines use a suction nozzle that can only pull air from the open mouth of the bag. As soon as you try to vacuum a bag of marinated chicken or a container of soup, the liquid gets sucked out and the seal fails. The VEVOR's 100 kPa vacuum power, combined with a full chamber design, pulls air from the entire bag while the bag itself stays sealed inside the chamber. In practice, that means you can drop a bag of freshly chopped strawberries tossed in a light syrup, close the lid, and walk away knowing the seal will stay intact without any spillage. For anyone who does sous-vide cooking, that's a real time saver because you can batch seal dozens of portion-size bags in one go, then pop them straight into the water bath. The 23.62-inch sealing length is another practical advantage. Most home users quickly outgrow the 10-inch width of countertop models when they start storing larger cuts of meat or bulk freeze vegetables. With this longer seal, you can comfortably fit a full-size salmon fillet, a pack of bulk frozen berries, or even a stack of pre-cut cheese slices in a single bag. I've seen people use it to seal whole chicken breasts that have been brined for 24 hours. The seal holds up through the entire cooking process and the meat stays juicy. That flexibility is exactly where the value starts to appear. You're not forced to split a big item into multiple smaller bags, which means less waste and fewer containers cluttering your freezer. Now, the dual lock seal feature is a little more nuanced. It's essentially a two-step sealing cycle where the machine first creates a preliminary seal, then reinforces it with a second pass. For everyday dry goods like nuts or crackers, a single lock is enough, but when you're sealing something with a high liquid content, the dual lock reduces the chance of microleaks that could let air creep in over weeks of storage. In a real-world test, a batch of marinated pork chops sealed with the dual lock stayed freezer fresh for over 2 months with no signs of freezer burn. If you're a hobbyist who occasionally freezes a few bags, you might never notice the difference. If you run a small catering business and need consistent, long-term preservation, that extra step becomes a tangible benefit. Stability during batch operation is a claim that often feels vague on paper, but it translates into a smoother workflow when you actually have a line of bags to process. The VEVOR's motor is rated at 1200 W, which provides enough suction power to maintain consistent vacuum pressure even as you open and close the chamber repeatedly. In a busy kitchen setting, you might be sealing a stack of 1012 bags back-to-back while prepping for a dinner service. The machine doesn't wobble, and the vacuum level doesn't dip noticeably between cycles. That steadiness can shave a few minutes off each batch, which adds up during a rush. On the flip side, there are practical trade-offs you need to consider. The first is space. Although the unit is marketed as compact, the chamber itself occupies roughly the footprint of a small dishwasher, and the lid adds a little extra height. If your kitchen counter is already crowded with a stand mixer, coffee maker, and a few cutting boards, you'll need to designate a dedicated spot, possibly on a shelf or a utility cart. For a home cook with limited counter real estate, that could be a deal-breaker, especially if you only seal a few bags a week. Noise is another factor that often gets overlooked. The vacuum pump inside the chamber produces a low rumble that's louder than a typical edge seal model. In an open-plan kitchen, the sound is audible but not disruptive, However, if you live in a small apartment and plan to run the sealer early in the morning, the noise could be a nuisance. It's not a scream-inducing roar, but it's something to keep in mind if you're sensitive to